Uh, okay, so I started the recording, and I'm with Ran Weingarten, and I probably just screwed it up. Did I screw up the last name the second time?
Weingartner.
Weingartner. Dang it!
Yeah.
See, I got it right the first time. I told you I was going to mess it up.
So
Uh,
close. So
so
close.
close, so close. Uh, so Ran and I are both part of. I'm going to give Jay Thorne a plug for a second because he's
Yeah.
new. Ran and
Totally.
I are both part of this online community called the Author Success Mastermind that Jay Thorne runs. It's got a brilliant Slack channel, and Chris Kane is putting out content every week on like learnings and interviews, and it's really, really fantastic. And Ran has gone the extra step and is also part of Jay's mastermind group, which is it a yearly commitment or a 6 month commitment?
Yeah. It's a year this year.
It's a yearly commitment, and it's a once a week meeting. Yeah, and I think it's full right now. But
It's full right now. Yeah.
yeah, I highly recommend that you watch if you're interested in having a week with amazing authors and sitting with Jay and learning about publishing and writing and all that good stuff. That you consider it. So, Rand, tell us a little bit about you and where you're at with writing career and what's going on.
So I spent a number of years writing nonfiction uh, articles and academic papers and sort of in that vein. And I've always written fiction on the side, right? I've always written like just had a few runs at some novels and wrote a few short stories. And I wasn't really taking myself very seriously. And yeah, in the middle of 2020, I was like, I want to do more of this and I want to get better at it. And I want to hang out with people who do this. And yeah, so I figured the best way to learn really is to do like just a bunch of short stories, write a bunch of scenes. It's kind of like when you're a musician and you do scales, like just get that muscle memory going, get that,
100%. Yeah.
so yeah, so this is one of the short stories that I spend a lot of time on. I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah, it's a
um,
great story.
Thanks,
Yeah.
thanks. It feels good to
Yeah.
hear you say that.
Yeah, and that approach I really I think is fantastic. I did the same thing when I started writing. I took a course um by Joe Bunting called How to Write a Short Story, and started writing a story every night for almost a year. I
Oh,
just
wow.
would sit down. I didn't know anything. I'd never written anything before. I'd never like focused on anything before, but I tell you what, those 52 short stories, like learning how to like, okay, just banging it out, like what works, what
Yeah,
doesn't work. Yeah, it reminded me a lot of when I played baseball in high school, and that hitting a baseball is all about like technique and form, and it really is just muscle. You got to just train your muscles to do it
yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah.
um and so
Drills, right? Like,
yeah, and so like I can remember standing in the batting cage and having like the pitching machine just throwing pitches at me and not even swinging, just working on like taking a step with my left foot toward the
yeah,
mound, and then you'd work on like left foot and crack the hip and like left foot and crack the hip, and like it really was like learning a dance, just kind of a step at a
yes,
time. And I felt like for me, I don't know if you're feeling this way, but for me, short story work was that way too. It was like,
yes,
okay, plot, does the crisis work, does the crisis work, does the crisis work, like does the voice work, does the voice work,
right.
does the voice work. And it's just that like hammering out until some of it becomes second nature, so you can start thinking about the other things, right?
Yes,
Like, yeah, because if
yes,
we can hit the plot points, like if we can get the skeleton built and we can start learning how to drive a conversation with dialogue, and we can like not have to worry about like how it sounds to the reader's ear, then we
yeah.
can really start like obsessing over characterization and themes and meaning, and which I love your piece because the so I'm going to describe it before we start looking at it, because it's such a great. Do you know what you're going to do with it?
Well, I no, I mean,
Okay.
yes, I guess. Like I wanna still work on it. I don't think it's quite there, and I think your notes I read them this morning. I think are gonna bring it to the next level. But then, yeah, I'd like to try to get it published. Like, I'd like to
Yeah,
format it
please
and
submit
send it
it
out.
somewhere. It's good.
Yeah.
I take a couple more passes at it and then get it out
Yes.
because it's
Yeah.
good. Yeah, so what I love about it is the mixture of the surreal
Hmm.
nature of it and really this how the dialogue builds to a surreal climax, which is really cool. Um and then how it and the emotional tension that's happening within Sarah, the main character. So it's first person point of view. Main character Sarah. Uh and yeah, and I'm not going to spoil it too much. And I think I can go through the notes without spoiling it too much. So, let me share my screen and so we can look at it and then we're going to talk through it
Okay.
together. And
Okay.
my goal, as always with a session when I do this with people, is my hope in this is to give you some things to think about, not just with this piece, but like long term.
Yes. Yes.
To like just so like, as you're in the batting cages, like, moving that foot and cracking that hip, that you can keep these in mind, is my goal.
Okay.
Um, okay, so I sent you 11 things that I wanted to talk about, which is usually I do like four, but I really loved the piece. So I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. There's so much I want to talk about. Um, was there anything on the list of 11 that I sent you that you want to cover that I didn't hit?
Anything on the list that I want?
Sorry,
No, I
sorry, that was really a weird thing to say. Is there anything I left off of the list, maybe?
off the list.
That's
Okay.
what I meant to say. Yep.
No, I don't think so. I
Okay,
think you were pretty thorough.
awesome. All right, so let's go
Yeah,
into it.
and
So, oh yeah,
you hit the bits that I really, because I gave you the whole story.
yeah,
I thought to give you the part on the plane, but because that's like the heavier dialogue, but I really wanted you to have context,
yeah,
and like you just some of the things that have been niggling at me, like they've just been like, this isn't quite right, and I can't put my finger on it. You hit. So
yeah. Um, okay, so let's jump in. So I want you, as we talk about this, I want you to think about a dialogue, especially when we're in this conversation, um, especially as we're in these one-on-one conversations, as uh, either a fight or a dance between two people.
oh wow, okay,
So hostile dialogue is a fight, right? So this opening scene between Sarah, who is leaving Rihanna, um, this is an intense emotional scene, and they have competing agendas. That's what makes it a fight,
right,
is they have competing
right,
agendas. So what we want to do with this opening scene is, well, so the reason we want to think about it as a fight is that when one of them swings, the other has to duck or take the punch, and then should reply with something else, right? So there has to be a give and take, and for every, Newton's third law applies here, that for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. So if Rihanna comes in heavy, like with a haymaker that she's just gonna, a really strong jab, um, how Sarah either takes that jab on the chin, the hurt that is caused by that jab needs to be felt, or the speed of the duck to get out of the way needs to be felt. So to drop the metaphor, we need Sarah's reactions to match the level of Rihanna's punches, of what Rihanna's
okay,
saying. So this is
yeah,
a good, and this is one of those things that I saw throughout the piece. So I was like, okay, this is a good thing to talk about, because I think the dialogue you have is really pulling the reader in. But if we can take the emotional power of that dialogue and just ramp it up to this, stronger level, it's really going to grab the reader and make the reader feel the pain of the piece. So here's an example of it right here. We have just opening the piece, you've made up your mind then? Rihanna asks from the bedroom door. I've already stayed too long, I said, packing my bag. I told you when the fall comes, I have to go. Sarah, you don't have to leave. She came over and took my face in her hands. I've seen the scars and I know how bad it gets. So that right there, right? Like somebody walking across the room and taking your face, like that's an intimate moment, and it's communicates possession, right?
Yeah.
Like at this point in the story, because I don't know what's happening, I don't know if this is a healthy or an unhealthy relationship. I don't know if
Yeah.
she's domineering over a passive character. And what happens with Sarah's response is going to communicate to me the power levels of these two characters.
Oh
Right? So like
my God.
I need to see, is Sarah an equal here, or is Sarah submissive? And if she's submissive, her submissiveness needs to match the aggression of Rihanna. Right? So Rihanna's walking over, Sarah's packing a bag, Rihanna's walking over, Rihanna's taking her face in her hands. So she's making her turn and look at her. Right? Like, so that turn and look at me is that like that's a strong jab.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's a lot of emotional content there.
Yeah.
And then we get this, so I need to see how Sarah responds. And originally you just gave Sarah a line, no you don't know, you think you can walk me through it. And so you go into this paragraph of Sarah, but
Yeah.
I don't have any physical response to the physical jab. So I need to know how she feels about it. So I added two lines here where it's like she came and took my face, forcing me to turn from my suitcase and then look at her. That's supposed to be her, but I can't spell. Um, so that like adding that line, I'm trying to up the weight of what Rihanna's doing, because grabbing somebody's face is already a big moment. So I'm just expressing to the reader, like, hey, she forced me to turn and look at her. Um, and so then I said, I pushed her hands away and pulled back. Right. Like, so it's this like no, and then stepping back. So we have Sarah on equal footing now with Rihanna, right? Like, so thinking about, and I'm not saying keep these two lines, I'm saying think about who Sarah is and how she would respond to this level of forced intimacy,
Yeah.
right? Like, does she hold the hands on her face
Right.
when she talks as like an expression of like, yeah, you and I are in this together, we get it, right? Or does she
Yeah.
just look
Yeah.
down and like keep the hands on her face and tell me how the
Yeah.
hands feel, right? Like,
Yeah.
this is such a, you're starting the piece with such a powerful, intimate moment. Like, pull me into it.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah. So there's another one of these on page 3. Here's page 3. Uh, third sentence of the page. Um, did I leave my notes wrong? I may have. I did. I put that note. So that's the one I wanted to talk about. This is something else. Um, so let's talk about people typically responding to the first thing that's said. Um, this is another thing that I want you to watch in your dialogue, because it's one of those things that happens. Sorry, before I move on, I'm so into like what I want to talk about with this piece. I'm skipping steps. Any questions about that, like back and forth, um, giving the same weight and communicating to us where characters stand with each other?
No, it's brilliant. The idea of like it's either a fight or a dance, and there needs to be this equal and opposite, energy exchange, and that needs to be more explicit, like
Yeah.
pulled out, slowed down and pulled out is
Slow it down and pull it.
really
Oh,
good.
slow down and pull out are great words. Slow it down and pull it out. And that's, part of what we're doing when we do this uh, with a piece is we're telling our reader, like, um, this is the scene in my head. And
Right.
not like a lot of times we'll think of this scene in our head as a movie and we're like, I want you to see what I see, but
Right.
I don't want you to think of it as a movie. I want you to think of it as a VR experience, right? Like, and think like VR experience with the full, like what we want the movie, what we want VR to be, the
Yeah.
full emotive touch, feel, smell experience, right? Like, because it's not just about having them see what you see, it's about having them feel what you feel. And this is that, like, this is a bomb dropping moment. So pull them in and have them feel that pain here. And tell us who Sarah is through how she responds to this thing.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Okay. So let's look at the top of paragraph 4, top of 1. Okay. See, I try to leave notes for myself and then I can't follow them because I'm the worst. Okay, so we've got yeah. So we have this paragraph, which I'm going to come back to at the end. I don't want to talk about it because I want to get to the end of the piece to talk to you about why I'm coming back to this paragraph. Um, because what it says
Okay.
is great, but we need to break it up some. So just a teaser. So we have this paragraph, and I'm just going to read the end of it. Sarah talking to Rihanna, you'll get tired and then you'll get angry, and there won't be any damn thing I can do about it then. Trust me, it's better this way. Isn't that for me to decide? So this isn't that for me to decide is seems to be referring um, to the whole paragraph, but really to the action that Sarah is describing. And then so it's better this way. Isn't that for me to decide? Well, no, it's better this way is Sarah's opinion, right? What is for her to decide is what's actually what Sarah is describing will happen. So we need to pull this paragraph back to what's describing will happen so that because when we talk to people, 9 times out of 10, unless we're not listening, and this is a focus, like they're listening. So unless we're not listening, we typically refer to the last thing somebody said. So if I ask you like 4 questions and I'm like, okay, so tomorrow, um, do you want to get lunch? Do you want to drive there together or do you want to drive there separately? If we get lunch, where would you want to go? Right. The question you're 90% most likely to answer is where would you want to go?
The very last. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to go to Panera. And then you'll be like, and yeah, we can drive each other. Right. Like, so that's that, like, that's just how our brains work. We digest the last thing said first.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So we want this is a great, like, isn't that for me to decide is great, but we don't want her saying that to what was said up here.
Yeah. Yeah.
We
Yeah.
want
Yeah.
her. So I just added a line here. I'm actually going to recommend you take that line out and bust this paragraph up, but
Yeah.
we'll get back to that
Okay.
later.
Okay.
Um, but that's just something to keep in mind that when people are throwing all of this stuff at your character, the last thing the character says, the last thing they say is what the next person's going to respond to. Um, there's also something in here that's interesting about uh, the psychology of couples fighting, right? Like I've done a
Hmm.
lot of in my previous life, I did some marriage counseling and premarital
Yeah.
counseling. And one of the things we always talk about in premarital counseling is how do you fight fair based on your personalities? Because every personality fights a little bit different. Sorry, this is a little bit of a rant, but you know,
No.
it
No. 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 This is
goes
good.
where it goes. So, for example, I know one couple where the husband is a very strategic thinker, and it comes from a family that loves to debate. So when he's in a fight, he's building arguments, he's lining them up, and like a lawyer, he's just going to fire them off, right?
Yeah.
Because arguments for him are about um, overwhelming the opposition with as much
Right.
as he can.
The
And
logic.
yeah, logic and all that stuff. And at the same time, the wife has a more emotive response and
Right.
really has an emotional reaction immediately, right? Like, so while he's firing off things, she's still reacting to the first thing he said,
Right.
right?
Right.
Like, so that's one style of fighting. I worked with another couple where the husband was very passive, and in a fight, he internally stewed and he kept everything closed inside, right? But the wife was a little bit of a powder keg, and she would explode and yell and run around and, act crazy. Not crazy is a bad word. She would act passionate. There we go. That's an appropriate word. She
There,
would
that's
act,
a good one.
yeah, she would act passionate because she wasn't being crazy. She was firmly standing for her beliefs in a very vocal way. So she would act passionate. And so you have him in silence in the room and her marching around the room, right? Like yelling, throwing accusations. And if
Right.
I were to write them into a piece, I would write, he would only respond to her with body language, right? Because we need the fight going, right?
Yeah.
Like we need to show her throwing punches and we need him responding to those punches. But his responses would be sighs, would be crossing his arms, would be looking at his watch, would be, subtly hinting that like they have other things to do today, right? Like so, which would just enrage her more.
Right.
So we have a couple here that's fighting, and Rihanna desperately holding on to the relationship. And I love that you've dropped us right into the middle of it, right? Like first sentence of the piece, we're there.
Yeah.
So part of this is about like, how do they fight? And like, what does that fighting look like? Um, and what I'm seeing so far is that Rihanna's using emotional and intimate techniques to try and manipulate her partner, and Sarah is going to lecture. So but I don't know that that's right. Right. Like that's kind of what comes out of this second paragraph where Sarah pulls this lecture
Right.
out. So I would, before you edit this, and again, I want to come back at the end and talk about editing it. Before you edit it, um, I would give some thought to how these two characters interact in a fight. What does it look like? Who are they emotionally? What are their personalities? And how are those personalities going to impact how they fight?
Okay.
Yeah. So, any thoughts on that, or anything you want to talk more about with that?
No.
Okay.
I remember hearing one of your podcasts where you mentioned that, um, just some of the I forget what framework you use, but I remember, like, that's what comes to mind right now is like really getting to know, you know, their personality, like delving a little bit deeper into their personality, right? And in terms of how do they, um, so how do they respond? How do they react? What are their coping,
Yeah,
right?
coping
How do they
strategies.
cope with it? Yeah. What are their
Yeah.
coping strategies?
Yeah. And the question here is like for Sarah, who is struggling with depression,
Yeah.
how does she respond to this?
Yeah.
And is trying to do something noble, right? Like
Right.
she feels the depression coming on, so she's trying to save her partner from
Right.
the
Yes.
experience. She wants to
Yes.
carry it all herself.
Yes.
Um, so the question is like, how does that depressive nobility look in
Yeah.
this moment? And if you can key that up here, and we'll go ahead and talk about this paragraph. If you can key that up here, um, this thing is gonna really ring true. So I'd invest more
Okay.
time in this opening. And so what I would do with this big paragraph, the content you have here is fantastic. But this
Hmm.
phrase, um, you'll be comforting and supportive and hide all the scissors and knives, but winter is long, and depression is dark. They need to sit with that, right? Like in quotation, needs to respond, and she needs to feel defeated. And she needs, like,
I
her
see.
body language needs to show defeat. and she needs to say something like, I want to try. And
Right.
then you can pull this, right? Like you'll get tired and
Right.
you'll get angry and there won't be a damn thing I can do about it then. And then you need Ree to say like, I wish you thought more of me,
Right.
right? Like
Okay.
I think more of you, right? Like so now we're getting in, like now we're getting into their relationship and you
Yeah.
can feel it start to hurt. And then you can have her say, trust me, it's better this way. And then
Yeah.
Ree can say something like, I wish you'd let me be part of this
Yeah.
decision, right? And then we need one final thing, right? Because she says, isn't that for me to decide? Which rhetorically is a nice ending because you come back to it at the end. But the problem is, this is such an emotionally heightened scene. The next step being, I let the question hang in the breath is when Aaron took my phone. I weighed 1,000 pounds in my hand shaking. She's got to respond to that.
Yeah.
She's got to say something, right? Like, and maybe just say like, my bag is packed, right? Like, or something that refers to the bag. And then you can move into this
Yeah.
piece
Yeah.
of I let it hang in the air. And because this is a nice paragraph, right? Like the language here is fantastic. It's very illustrative, it's very communicative, but we need that resolution that Sarah just won the fight,
Right.
right? Like we need
Right.
to feel that Sarah just won the fight and that Ree is going to be left alone right at home. Um, it's yeah, it's really
Wow.
great. So
Wow.
if we can
Okay.
stretch this out and we can really get into that emotional back and forth, right? Like this is the kind of piece where when you write this dialogue, I would expect you to be crying. Because
Yeah.
it's going to hurt you to write, right? Like that's what sucks about these kind of moments is that like, man, they're great on the page and readers are going to love it, but this is going to cost you something.
Yeah.
And you need to let it cost you something because it'll be worth it in the end. But you're going to emotionally pay for it.
It's so true. Like it's so true. Like this whole piece actually.
Yeah.
Like by the end of it, I felt a little bit beat up. It's like I got to put this aside. Like find some
Yeah.
joy.
It sucks. It's hard. There's two types of pieces. There's two types of scenes I hate writing. The first ones are like these, where I know I'm in it and it's going to devastate me. And a lot of
Yeah.
times they're personal, right? Like,
Yeah.
well, the book I'm working on right now um is has a lot of personal scenes in it, and one of them is I was working in the inner city with homeless addicts, and I had this experience where one of them was hanging out with me and he was like, hey, can you drive me to the hospital? I think I need some help. And I'm like, yeah, okay. And then like, as it was the stupidest thing in the world to do, because as I'm 5 minutes into the drive, he starts ODing.
Right.
And I'm literally watching this guy die in the passenger
Yeah.
seat next to me as I'm trying to like navigate traffic.
Right.
Right. Like the appropriate thing to do would be like to have set him down on the corner and be like, hey, are you okay? And then call an ambulance. But
Right.
instead, I was like, oh, yeah, get in my car. It's going to be fine. So, writing that scene, like reliving that moment, writing that scene is so painful. And
Yeah.
I'll write like 10, 15 words and then I'll just be like, I'm done. I'm done. And I'll go like work on something else because I can't. I'll go set up an Amazon ad because I can't deal with it. So that those scenes suck. And the other scenes that suck are the reverse, where you know a scene isn't working. And I'm working on a scene right now in that same book where I have to introduce four new characters and it is not working. It feels like
Beautiful.
it feels like Kermit standing on the side with the Muppets, where like Muppets are just coming in. He's like, "Oh, Piggy!" It's the worst scene ever, and I've been writing it for 3 days. I just keep walking away from it. Like this is the worst. I can't write those either. Yeah. So anyway, but yeah, it's I would lean into it.
Okay.
Let us pull this opening out and let us feel it because this what I love about what you're doing in the piece, which I'm going to make the assumption is on purpose, which is great, is this is very realistic. And then we get to the taxi cab and the surrealism starts.
Yes.
And then we get to the plane and the surrealism gets big, right? Like, and then we
Yeah.
get back home and it's realistic again. So
Right.
that kind of like ebb and flow of surrealism and realism makes the piece like really brilliant. So I would lean into the realism here and
Okay.
like
Okay.
make us live her world and live this pain between these two people because they clearly care for each other, right? Like they
Yeah.
clearly both
Yeah.
want to help the other one, but they have these competing agendas. And
Right.
there's a deep lack of trust, right? Like that is the real problem with this.
Yeah.
I was analyzing this as a, you know, working with a married couple, I'd be like, yeah, the problem is you don't trust each other. Like Rihanna, you don't
Right.
trust that it's as bad as Sarah says it's gonna get.
Right.
And Sarah, you
Right.
don't trust that Rihanna's gonna stick around, so you're trying to head her off at the pass, right?
That's
Like
right.
so you've
That's
got
right.
this super
Yeah.
real moment. Like let's just dig in. Um,
Okay.
yeah, even though it's gonna hurt you. Uh bleed on the page. Um okay, next one down. Um Oh, I love this. I wanted to point this out because this is brilliant. Um, so the taxi cab pulls up and the trunk is open, and the driver, a very short man wearing a flat cap and chewing on an unlit cigar, waddled over to take my bag. Ah, fantastic one sentence description. I have him in my head completely. Uh, you take plastic? I ask, handing it to him. Yep, sure do. He gasped, dropping my bag like it was filled with rocks. She, uh, oh shit, he swore. They're gonna make sorry, I'm terrible at reading dialect. They're gonna make you they're gonna make you check that bag. No way, it's a carry-on, I said, lifting my bag off the ground and plopping it in the trunk. He shrugged. This so what our natural desire to do as writers is to talk directly at the thing. Right? Like I picked up the extremely heavy bag filled with all of my things that I was carrying with me. And it was heavy to carry, but I didn't have a problem carrying it. Right. Like that's what we want to do. But this secondary introduction of a major physical piece is really brilliant because you get two people talking about it instead of just bringing it out. And it's 1,000 times more interesting, right? Like their conversation about a heavy bag, I'm so into it. But if you had given me a summary paragraph that was like, oh, the bag was so hard to pick up and I couldn't carry it, I'd be like, cut it, I don't care. But so this is great. Yeah, I really liked this piece. I just wanted to point it out. Did you know you were doing that when you did it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I could tell. It's really good. Um, okay, let's talk about dialogue tags for a minute. And by dialogue
Okay.
tags, I mean these phrases like I ask, he
Right.
said.
Okay.
So we want to use these, and this is some like high level crap. I'm getting really nitpicky with you right now, so just
Good.
bear with me.
Good.
Yeah, I'm like I'm gonna be a jerk about it. I'm not. I know that this is people are like seriously, Jeff. But yeah,
I
I'm gonna
think
do it.
I think it has to like. Well, I'm gonna let you talk, but it like your latest blog post I think talks about that. Like
Yeah,
I didn't revisit this like before reading it, and so I totally get like how it can be like interruptive, if you
yeah.
don't put this anyway. I
Yeah,
don't know
so
if that's what you're
I
doing.
did just write a newsletter about this, and I'm one of my weekly newsletters, and
Yeah,
I am yeah, and this is one of my like pet peeves
yeah.
because I think it makes work better. I'm not gonna apologize for
No,
trying to help.
no, not at all.
Yeah. So here we've got this sentence originally written. It was let her through. He finally said, "It's not a security problem. It's an airline problem. Let them deal with it."
Yeah.
Right. So my problem with putting that he finally said here is that there's not a natural break in that flow. What we
Yes.
want to hear in our ear is let it through. It's not a security problem. It's an airline problem. Let them deal with it.
Yeah.
And that he finally said made me take a mental breath, right? Like
Right.
a
Yeah,
mental,
yeah, yeah.
like it's like a comma. It's like putting a
Okay.
comma right into the middle of my mindset. So I want to take it and I just want to put it at the beginning. Finally, he said, let her through. It's not a security problem. It's an airline problem. Let them deal with it.
Yeah.
And now I have the like rattled off nature of what this guy's saying.
Yeah.
Now at the top of one, This is where it's perfect to put it in the
Right.
middle because I want that stop, that full
Yeah.
stop. So
Right.
I've already stayed too long. I said, packing my bag. I told you when fall comes, I have to go.
Right.
Right, like there's the emotional pacing there. You can see her. Right, I already stayed too long, and I told you when fall comes, I have to go.
Right.
Right, like we can feel. So this is a great place. Like you've got the line that you want. When you read it out loud, you can feel the emotional pacing of it. Stick that dialogue tag in there in the middle of that pause. Right,
Right.
like to force the reader to have the same pacing that you want.
Right.
Right, like, but down
Right.
here we want to be strategic about it and put it at the front of the back so that we don't have to, like, you have to notate who's talking here.
Yeah.
Otherwise it's going to be super confusing because this is a, like,
Yeah.
there's, she's in a big security area, and this is a like pivotal moment where they're like letting her move forward, and you're also talking about like the bag and whose problem it is, and like, so like this is a important piece. You have to say who it is that's speaking, but don't break the thought, because
Right.
it slows the reader down, and we want the reader engaged at all times. No slowing down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So this piece threw me. I want to talk about the emotional. Sorry, I'm not going to ask how you feel about me breaking dialogue tags because I don't want to talk about my own pet peeves anymore. So this piece threw me here. The orange, these orange letters I've sent out, because this is where the real surrealism begins, which I love. And because, and the reason I say that is because the attendants, the stewardesses response is way too emotional to be realistic.
Okay.
So my question is that on purpose?
So yes, but possibly not for the reason I thought.
What was
So
well, and so that's why I'm asking, because like it doesn't have to stay. The question is like, what do
yeah.
you want it to do?
So what I had in my mind was, like people are just like there's this huge lineup. There's kind of this big crowd and for this bustle in front of, and she's just trying to get people through, right? See your boarding pass, okay, go through. See your boarding. Sorry, you have to check that, move aside, and then trying to get the next person through. But Sarah's like, what? No, right? So she interrupts her twice, and by the third time,
Gotcha.
the stewardess is totally exacerbated. Like it's just like, look, move
Okay.
aside, deal, right? So I
Yeah.
don't, and that's not explicit on here at all. Like there's nowhere. When I read it this morning after your notes, I was like, oh, it's totally not there. Why she would ramp up to that, right?
Yeah. And so we either need, now I like the surrealism of it.
Yeah.
Um, what I would do is have Sarah taken aback here by her surreal. If you keep the surrealism,
Right.
have Sarah taken aback. Like, whoa. Um, so if you want the build up, you need to add 2 or 3 more
Yeah.
lines. Right? Like, so the build up would be like, I'm sorry, emotional baggage must be checked to this flight, she said. Uh, excuse me, please step aside and check your bag, ma'am.
Right.
Right? I'm not checking my bag. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step aside and check your bag.
Right.
Just
Right.
let me on the plane. Right, like, or I'm not letting go of that. If you want to stick with the theme, I'm not letting go of this is a great, like, I have to carry this, right? Like,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
this is my bag, right? Like whatever the expression you want to use there, you have an opportunity here to keep that thread going. And
Okay.
then she can say, that bag has to be checked. Right. Like, and now you're in the emotional, but we just need that like upflow of emotionality,
Okay.
especially for the scene you're describing where the stewardess doesn't care. Right.
Right.
Like,
Right.
so to get her to care, we have to ramp her into it. And that's why it feels
Right.
a little surreal right now, because she goes from 0 to 60 quick. Right. Like,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
we want her
Yeah.
to go, we want her, like, Sarah needs to make her care before she, yeah, by like
Right.
refusing to
Right. Right.
do,
Right.
yeah. Um, yeah. So that was, yeah, that was my, Yeah. Anyway, any other thoughts on that?
No,
Okay.
no, that was very clear.
Awesome. Um, okay. So inner thoughts and POV.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
So if
Bring
this
it.
were third person POV,
Yeah,
people who know who listen to the podcast would know I'll still complain about the italics, but I wouldn't take it out of the thought. But this is first person POV. The entire thing is her inner thought.
that's true.
So we don't
That's,
need to set aside anything in italics or in
so
quotation
here's
marks.
here's my question. Here's my question.
Yeah.
There's like italic. Oh no, actually no. Never mind. I just answered my own question. Yeah, you're right.
Well, ask it anyway. You don't know. I might
So
give
I
you.
would think. Okay,
I'm
so
always open to being proven wrong.
no, I don't think so. I just saw it like on the page. So there was like the way that I, and maybe I have to rework this. Like, so there's like first person POV as in, okay, am I like I'm in the moment and am I doing the right thing or am I like it's almost like in the present, right?
Yeah.
And then there's like back then I thought blurty blurty blur, but now I feel differently. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it
And I think you are introducing a new style here in the middle of the piece where she's suddenly doing some self talk, and it's
okay,
different than like. So you're correct in that there is what I would call self talk, where you're like
okay,
talking to yourself, and then there's perspective. Those are two
okay,
different things. But in this heated emotional moment at the top, there's no self talk.
right. No.
So there can't be self talk here,
Oh,
right?
interesting.
We're adding a new trait to her personality here, which is self talk. Because, like, yes, if you want to go full Bridget Jones' Diary, where she's like narrating to herself what's going on, you have to do it all the way throughout.
All the way through.
You can't
Interesting,
introduce it in the
interesting.
middle.
Okay, okay.
So, I mean, you can, but you're going to get people like me be like, no, no.
Right, right.
So, there's a couple ways to go about this. Either put some self talk at the beginning, which I
Yeah,
would recommend because I don't necessarily. Self talk is one of those weird things where, like, it's a cheat, right? Like, we're cheating when we add self talk because it's a way to get an emotion across that we don't want to do the hard work to actually get across.
yeah. So is it kind of like a form of tell
Oh,
rather
it's
than showing in a
100% a
way?
form of tell. Well,
Okay.
it's like I need to show this. I can't just tell it. So I'm going to have the character say it to themselves. No, cheating. Take this line and put it up with her and the stewardess, right? Like put it up here with the stewardess. So just move because what you want to get across here is that like she just wants to let go and fly and be free. That the
Yeah,
airplane represents to her freedom from her baggage,
yeah.
which she's going to find out when she gets on the plane. So because she can't fly unless she checks it. So
Right,
put it up here in the dialogue here because that's a great point, right? Like so I'm sorry, but all emotional baggage must be checked before this flight. Excuse me? You need to check that bag, ma'am. Look, I'm just trying to get out of here.
right,
I just need to fly away. Ma'am, you cannot fly while you're carrying that bag. But it's my bag. You can't
right,
keep me from flying without my bag. Right? Like, so put it up here in the conversation. Now it's still relatable and connecting. Don't cheat and put it in
okay,
unless you want to make that part of her personality where
right,
she Bridget Jones Diary self talks all the time,
right,
right? Like that's really that kind of self talk can be very effective for characters that are alone a lot,
right,
which is kind of the point of Bridget Jones, which is why that works because she's alone all the time. So she's having a conversation with herself about being alone.
right.
So that's a good one. Give me 1 second. Hobbs, no, stop. Sorry, my dog wants to go outside, but he can't because he just had surgery, and so he's not allowed to go out there. But he's just sitting there barking at the door until I tell him something.
Is he doing okay?
Yeah, he's great.
You're right.
Yeah, he's got a cone on, which is really funny and sad at the same time.
The cone of
Um,
shame.
the cone of shame. He has on the cone of shame. That's actually what my kids and my wife and I all call it, the cone of shame. You had another piece of self talk down here too.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's happening? This is it. What's happening? I thought. I have her say it out loud. Just say it.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
My head was swimming. I had to get her away from this crowd. Right? Like, so I would just add it, like, what's happening? I said to no one in particular. My head was swimming. I had to get away from this crowd. I unbuckled my seatbelt and dragged myself to the back of the plane. Right? Like, just put it in her mouth so we can enjoy it as well, as opposed
Okay.
to in her head where it belongs to her.
Okay.
Um, yeah. Okay, keeping lines contained to characters so we can feel their give and take. This is another piece of that, like, think of it as a fight or think of it as a dance. We want to see one character's reaction and then the next character's reaction, and then one character and the next character. We want that like back and forth, push and pull. So, um, top of four is the note I wrote to myself. Yeah, so here we had, it's not that kind of scale, he said, handing me my claim chip. Better get a move on, he said, thrusting his chin toward
That's a lot, eh?
the waitress. It is a lot. I didn't mind it. You know, you may want to put a response from her here, right?
Right,
Like, it's not that kind of scale. He said, handing me my chip. I put the chip and jammed it in my pocket, frustrated.
right,
Better get
right.
a move on, he said, thrusting his chin toward the waiting stewardess. I looked back at her and saw her waving over me. I took my claim chip and headed to the plane. Good luck, he chuckled as I walked away. And then I put this down here to give
Yeah,
that like back and forth. Um, but yeah, so that kind of like making sure there's this give and take all the way through is going to really help. There was another example of it too.
I think it was at the very end with
Yeah, this is it
the
right here.
weirdest.
Oh, it's on 4. Yeah, this is it right here. Um,
Oh,
so
there. Okay.
yeah, it's this is the other one right
Yeah,
here.
yeah, yeah.
So it says, no silly disemboweled head, the disembodied head giggled. Cognitive behavioral therapy did wonders for my Charles. The head and the suited man kissed. Analysis did it for me, said another voice. There's no time for analysis. I have a connecting flight. The entire cabin was weighing in. So originally you had this, there's no time for analysis. I have a connecting flight. The entire cabin was weighing in on the same line.
Okay.
So just put it down on the next line because it lets us know that, like, hey, the whole cabin is speaking, right? Like, so because this is one of those scenes where you're talking to the crowd, right? Like
Yeah.
in a Greek drama, this was the main character would come out and then the chorus would come out and be on
Right,
like the side of the stage and the main character would have a conversation with the chorus, right?
right,
Like, so um it's a great scene. It builds the like crazy surreal experience she's having, like build up of the pain she's got going on as she reckons with this bag. um so it's really nice, but just making sure your spacing is in there to have her them, right? Like, so we get this back and forth with the chorus, or earlier with the guy checking bags,
right.
that back and forth, her him.
Okay.
um yeah. So another thing, I left this note. I wasn't going to talk about it, but you have this really fantastic emotional build here, where at first she's having a problem with the stewardess,
Right.
and you know she curses. So we're building this like intensity,
Yeah.
right? And then the whole plane starts chiming in, and she just starts getting pelted
Yeah.
with ideas, right?
Right.
Like, um, it's checked, I called after her. A woman popped her head over the seat in front of me. Just think positive, she chirped in, right? What I said, realizing I'd started to sweat. This is another one of those places where I
Yeah.
started to sweat with the woman, and
Gotcha.
I want to move it to her, right? Like, because it's her thing.
Yeah.
Think happy thoughts, gratitude, a voice said in my right. I look, so you have this, like, they're starting to pelt her with all of these things that are going to solve her depression,
Yeah.
right? And then here she interjects, cannabis oil? I ask. Give that to somebody else, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
let the rocks keep coming, right?
Yeah.
Like, keep them coming, keep them like throwing in. And then just to keep the like stoning going on, the verbal stoning happening, I wanted like a couple more. right? Like of like nondescript, just to give us like the bigger fog of what's happening. Just give us like a few more. Like you need to pray it out. Like you
Yeah,
need
yeah, that was a
yeah,
great
you need to
suggestion.
do, you need to meditate more. Mindfulness fixed it, right? Like, so just like throwing more rocks at her, just like piling it on. Um, and I would even just like keep them completely nondescript. Another voice said, another voice called,
Okay,
another voice called. And then you can have this like the entire cabin was weighing in.
right.
And actually, I would have the like, what is happening? I yelled. My head was swimming, right? Like you don't even need that line the guy was saying in. Just have her like yell it.
Okay,
And then we have a nice transition, all right? Like if she can have that verbal outburst of like, what is going on? And then we have this transition into like the actual conversation
yeah,
that she needs to have, which is great. So yeah, just working on the like emotional build there to just pound us with it. Um, Something I'm learning as a writer personally is that sometimes what I think is creative nuance is actually just not enough,
hmm,
right? Like um a friend of mine and I were talking recently about her work, and she was talking about whether or not she went all in with something or kept it nuanced. And and we decided that most famous artists are famous because they didn't go all in. So just being sarcastic, but like go all in,
okay,
right? Like throw it all in. Like let us have it. Let us feel it.
okay,
Um, because in this kind of like there are times when nuance is appropriate, but
yeah,
in this kind of emotional build where you want to drive a character to a breaking point, nuance is not your friend. So
okay,
just let us have it, right? Like take the baseball bat out and beat the crap out of us with it so
okay,
we feel it.
okay.
Yeah. Okay, so 10 that we talked about 9. So 10 is example in red. I evidently color coded it, but I can't remember why I color coded it. Oh, 3 dots.
Oh yes.
That's why I can't find it because it's so small. Right here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you use them a lot. I can't. I
Yeah, I
look.
do. Yeah.
Look, I said pulling my hoodie back on. No. Pulling my hoodie back on, I said, I can't. Look, I've been on the meds, done all the therapies. When winter comes, it's heavy. Those 3 dots are problematic because they may not be communicating what you want them to communicate.
Right.
They communicate like I can't even tell you grammatically what their purpose is. I don't know. I just know what they do on the page. And so, and I know that they do different things for different people.
Okay.
So most people hear it as like trailing off,
Right.
as like I've stopped listening to you,
Right.
which is not what you want here,
No.
right? You want her stuttering.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I can't, period. Look, period. I've been on all the meds, period. I've done all the therapies, period. When the winter comes, it's heavy, right? Like you want the full stops. And you do this a lot
I
with
do.
these.
Yeah, I do. I totally
Yeah,
do.
I would. So here's another one. She sat down on the floor beside me. Seems to me that's not your decision. 3 dots. So it seems to me like you're doing them when you want emotional weight.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
here, the words are enough. And if you want more emotional weight, give us more body language,
Okay.
right? She sat down on the floor next to me. Seems like that's not your decision, right? I dropped my head and looked at the floor.
Mm.
I thought about Ray, right? Like, so give her that, like, give her the physical, instead of the 3 dots, give us the body language that shows how hard it hits the other character, right? Like, we're going back to that fight, right? Like, give us the, so, in here, let it stand. Trust your words. You don't need the
Okay.
crutch of the 3 dots, right? Like, trust your words. Because this right here, that is some power, right? Like, that hurt. If anybody who's struggled with depression reads that, they're like, yeah, I get it. Right? Like I can't look. I've been on all the meds. I've done all the therapies. When winter comes, it's heavy. Right?
Mm.
Like like you can feel it in your chest. And
Yeah.
so yeah, the three dots are actually pulling out of it. So like
Okay.
take them out and
Okay.
trust your words. Trust that like what you're feeling when you wrote that is um
The
what the
reader.
uh what the reader is going to feel too.
Yeah.
Right? Especially when you're hitting us with a baseball bat like that. Yeah. Um and again here we have another inner thought. So heavy it grounds the plane, I thought. Those inner thoughts, again, they belong to the character, not to us, because they're not coming out of her mouth. So we want it coming out of somebody's mouth, right? Like, because we don't want to zoom out. Like, all of a sudden, we're in this scene, we're in this moment, they're sitting on the floor together, we're having this intense
Yeah.
conversation, and then she's thinking. And then we're back into the moment. Keep us in the moment, put it in somebody's mouth, right? Like, so that we can stay where we are and just live in this emotional tension for a little
Okay.
bit, right? So give it to the stewardess, right? Like, so heavy it grounds planes, right? Because this is a magical stewardess. She has deep insight into what's
She
happening.
gets
So
it.
just
She's
give her,
Yoda. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
just give her the magic insight, right? Like just let her
Yeah.
have it.
Totally.
Yeah, finish Sarah's thought, right? Like,
Okay.
yeah. Um, okay, so, and we've talked about 11 because I went ahead and went in, but so you can see why I want more at the opening now, because the ending
Yeah.
packs such an emotional punch. And it's surreal and it's weird and it's in Sarah's head, which is all fantastic and like wonderful. Like you take us on this wonderful emotional journey that's super painful, and I love every second of it. It started up here, right? Like
Yeah.
let us feel the depression, let us feel the pain of this relationship breaking up, let us feel what leads to this weird delusion fever dream, right?
Mm.
Like give it to us early. Um, but yeah, all that to say, this thing hits. It's a good. You've written a good piece.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah, it needs. I would like we said at the beginning, a
Yeah.
couple more passes, and I think you got something really special. But yeah,
Awesome.
thanks for letting me
Do,
read it.
do you just have do you have time, like, do you just have any comments about the final piece, so when she comes back to read?
If you make the beginning, um, it's interesting. I got to the end, and there was such a release that
Yeah.
like it's such a nice, like it's like the pressure coming out of an old pressure cooker.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
so I need to get off this plane, she said. I said, she smiled. I can get off the plane. Oh, sorry. I can get you off the plane, but you'll have to take the bag with you. Right? Oh man, that's profound. Yeah, I said, because what you're saying is that like this conversation didn't fix it. Right? Like we're
Yeah.
still in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Um no, I liked it. I liked when she leapt up, she hugged me. I might have her grab her face.
Right.
Right? Like I
Oh,
might bring
yeah.
back the emotional intimacy.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Um, you're sure about this? I asked her. You know, this may be too much. I don't know. This might be too cheesy. You might want them to get hit by a cold wind, just to let the reader know that, like, hey, winter's coming, right? Like, you might want to pull that in here. Like, you're sure about this? I asked as the wind blew. We both felt the chill and stood together in it, right? Like, give them some kind of like, you know, physical illustration of what's happening to match the bag. You may want to put that on
Yeah.
in here. But besides that, I thought it was great. Right? Like I thought the ending was a nice cadence, and it's going to feel twice as powerful if you make us if you make us feel her leaving more in the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah.
When she comes back, you won't need to do a lot in this ending when she comes back,
Okay.
because if you can make the beginning more painful, we'll feel it when we get back here at the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Good. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, let me check one thing at the top now that we're talking about it. You may want to add something here. I might add a sentence here to Rihanna at the beginning where she says, "So you made up your mind, you're leaving me." So that we know that this is a breakup. Because I didn't get that it was a breakup until the third paragraph.
Right.
So you might
Right.
want to
Right.
say that up front, that like, hey, because you're in essence you're starting a piece with an inciting with an
Yes.
inciting
Yeah.
incident, right? Like
Yeah.
there's two inciting incidents here because there's two different scenes. But this opening scene, you're not giving us the world before. You're starting right in the middle of an inciting incident, which
Yeah.
could be extremely powerful, especially in short fiction, because we don't have a ton of time to
Right.
jack around with their relationship before, and we don't actually care. So but you may want to make it clear here that you've made up your mind, then you're really doing this, you're
Yeah.
leaving me, right? Like, let us know that like this is a breakup happening from the first
Yeah.
sentence.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I might now that I think about the ending, I might add that, because it is the whole piece is about Sarah dealing with her depression, but we have this side conversation about their relationship
Yeah.
and their ability to weather it together. um
Right.
yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Anyway, I loved it. Anything else you want to talk about in the piece?
Oh man, I could talk about this with you all day. Talk about this stuff
It's
all
funny.
day.
Well, at some point I'll run out of insight. Probably like 5 minutes ago, but it's
Then we'll just do another scene.
that's right. You just pull up another one. No, I think it's Ran, you did a great job. It's really nicely done.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. That means a lot
Yeah.
coming from you. Like this is really a lot. Like um I have no words. Like it was really really helpful.
Good.
Um the way that you explain it, the way that you frame your feedback, um just really something that I can chew on, you know? Like I know where to go with this now. I know what I need to work on,
Yeah.
and
That makes me
and
really
that's
happy. That's my goal,
yeah, I
is
mean
that you
that's
can walk away being
priceless,
like, I know
man.
how to make
Like,
this better. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because that doesn't always happen with feedback, right? So I'm just really appreciative.
Good. Awesome. Well, I'm going to stop the recording and we can chat a little bit
Okay.
more.